Hi, I'm Murphy, and this is my channel, Murphy's Every Whim, where I talk about books because I love to talk about books, and YouTube is my only outlet. So today it is afternoon, as almost always. It's sunny and 89 degrees Fahrenheit outside, so a little on the warm side, and I want to finish up talking about my May reads. I started a video about this, or did a part 1 about this, and so I want to finish this. And I didn't read very much since then, and I just finished watching the Hitchcock movie Rope, and one of the things, one of the scenes in there, the two men who live in this apartment are greeting guests at the door, and in comes a book collector and his sister-in-law. And she's visiting, and she is complaining that she hasn't been able to go to very many parties, partly because her sister is ill, and her brother-in-law, who brought her to this party, is always cataloging his books. So he's a book collector. So, you know, she says, well, he can't go to parties because he's always cataloging his books. And he says, hey, I read them every once in a while too. And that's sort of how I've felt lately, that I've spent a lot of time maintaining my spreadsheet of books, organizing books, looking for books that should be purged, incorporating the books that I've hauled into my books. And I have purchased a lot of paper books lately, and that's partly because I've hadn't for such a long time. I pretty much isolated myself for all of COVID and didn't get out, but I've found a new excitement about reading paper books lately instead of listening to books, or even reading on a Kindle. I have a higher excitement for reading on my Kindle than I did for a while. And so I have gone and traveled a lot and gotten a lot of books. So I spent a lot of time cataloging them and not so much reading them lately. So I feel like the book, although I'm not a book collector, the book collector in the movie Rope. So I haven't read that much since May, so let's talk about the couple of books that I have read. I finished Female Husbands, A Trans History by Jen Manion. This is a history book that is about the 18th to 20th century. And the subjects of the book are people who were assigned female at birth who chose to live as men. And I talked about this book a lot last time, and so I don't want to, when I was introducing it, so I don't want to talk about it that much more. But I did want to point out that Manion says that trans male history has always been folded into lesbian history. So people who were assigned female at birth who chose to live with men were just always assumed to be lesbian, or history, the people writing history at the time had no idea how to fit them into some other category. And so she said that based on the records that we have, the stories, the newspaper articles, the court cases, etc., that she used as sources, it's impossible to distinguish between behaviors that indicate gender and behaviors that indicated sexuality. And that it is possible that some of these people who lived as men were doing so because they wanted to have relationships with women, and that was a way to do that. And so we don't know. We don't know whether they were choosing to live as men because they transgendered to male, or if they were living as men to have relationships with women, or a combination, or neither. It's impossible to really get at the distinction between gender and sexuality in these stories. And I thought that was interesting. Unfortunate and interesting. So I only read completely one other book. I only completed one other book, and that is The Darwin Affair by Tim Mason. It's a historical novel with a detective main character. And it's set in Victorian England and Europe. Victorian era England and Europe, and it's before the death of Prince Albert. And in fact, Prince Albert is one of the targets of the criminal in this situation. And it's the Darwin Affair, so you figure Darwin plays into this somehow. There is a main character who is a criminal who, I don't really want to say much about it. It's the unfolding of how we meet this character is part of the story. And this was an interesting read. I thought it had maybe a few too many of the overused tropes of Victorian England, but I only felt that to a certain point in the story, and after a while, either the story was more captivating to me and I didn't obsess over, they're going to mention this aspect of Victorian, of London. I got over that feeling and felt that I was really learning history. So it was an interesting read. It's the first of a 2-book series, I believe, so far. And so it's possible I might get the other book sometime. But I didn't just immediately go out and get it. And but this made me think that when a person has a certain set of knowledge about something, history or math or science, and you're reading a novel, it's often best to read a novel over a topic that you don't have any expertise in, any knowledge in, because then you don't know when things are good or bad. And I'm not saying that the history in this and the social conditions and etc. of 19th century England were badly written or anything. It's just that if you know a lot, then sometimes it's hard to get past how they're presenting that history and getting to the story itself. So it was a good book. Not right up there at the top of my list. The only other thing that I completed, it was a pamphlet, and this was read by Jay Draper. Jay Draper has a London history channel on YouTube, and she read The Horrors of Slavery by Robert Wedderburn. Wedderburn was the son of an enslaved woman in Jamaica and her owner. And he, in the circumstances, was not enslaved at birth. And so he was free, and he was writing about the relationship he had with his father, a slave owner, and other sons of that father, particularly sons who were possibly able to inherit from the father, whereas this son of an enslaved woman was not able to inherit. How how he was treated, how his mother was treated, etc. And so this was a pamphlet, and it had letters back and forth between Robert Wedderburn and this other son, and some other documents. And I think it might have been an excerpt, or maybe the way it was written, it made it sound like it was part of a larger piece, but maybe Wedderburn had planned to publish something larger. But it was interesting. It was interesting how much people moved around from one place to another at this time. And I'm sorry, I don't remember. I think this was written in the 19th century, but I'd have to check on that. Anyway, I find it interesting, fascinating how much people were able to move around from Jamaica to England to other places. And so these people in this pamphlet were mobile. They had mobility, whereas other people at the time, would grow up and live in the same place their entire life. And that made me think about what percentage of the population were mobile, etc. So it was an interesting, of course, heartbreaking, but interesting read. All right, so that's what I completed, just 2 books and a pamphlet, and only one of those books I started in this period. The other book, Female Husbands, I had been reading. And then what am I currently reading? I've gone back to reading, or listening to, I should say, Odd Billy Todd by N.C. Reid. And this is narrated by Christopher Lane. And I have to say that it is the narration that really keeps me involved with this book. It's rather slow going. The people in it are from Tennessee, and so they have a certain behavior. They're farm people from Tennessee, so they behave as you would expect farm people to behave, helpful towards each other, sort of standoffish to strangers, that sort of thing. It's a post-apocalyptic story. In this case, it was a flu or a virus that wiped out a large part of the population, and so these are the people who are left. So in that way, it's similar to The Stand. However, we focus on this one community of people who are trying to make a living. There are outsiders who come in and endanger them, who endanger their way of life, who want what they have. But so far, it focuses on building this community, which is nice. There has been some violence, but it's not been overwhelming. And so I had said in a previous video that I'd put this book to the side because I felt a little afraid of what was going to happen to everybody, and it's turned out so far that it's not that bad, but I'm only about a third of the way through. So I'm really enjoying that. And I forgot last time, I'm reading Heart of Darkness, and I'm reading this very slowly. I've read it before, and I'm reading it on paper, and I'm reading about a page a day. And I'm taking notes as I go along. And of course, even though I've read it before, I'm seeing things that I don't remember from before. I'm seeing things that I'm maybe reading in a different light than I have before because I've read other literature since then. And so this is an interesting read. I'm probably 2/3 of the way through that, but again, reading it very slowly, trying to digest a page, sometimes just a paragraph, but it is Joseph Conrad, so sometimes a paragraph can be a page and a half. Then I'm reading this in an anthology that I'm planning to read from front to back eventually, but right now I'm going very slowly. Last anthology I finished, it took me more than a decade to finish, so shows you how slowly I will be going. All right, so those are my current reads. That's it. It's June already. I believe it's June 4th today that I'm filming this. That might not be out for a few more days because I have some other videos in the queue. But I already thinking about what I'm going to read in June. I don't generally create a TBR, a to be read list. The name of this channel is Murphy's Every Whim, and so my whim may be I drop one book, pick up another book, pick up 3 books at the same time and read through them. You never know. I never know. Who knows? We could talk about free will sometime, but that's a whole different story. All right, so I've enjoyed telling you about what I've read, and I hope you've gotten something out of it. Take care, and I'll see you next time.